Welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, courageously expanding love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Has the way that love has arisen in you seemed out of place or even taboo? My mission is to expand the conversation of love in the world. Is it possible to have deep, loving, healthy relationships? Have you ever been curious about having more than one relationship or partner at a time? Get ready to transform in love, be courageous, and set yourself free. In this show, we talk about relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. I shed light on things that are not always talked about with conversations about expanding love. The Elizabeth Cunningham Show starts now. Hi, welcome to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show. I am your host, Elizabeth Ann Cunningham, and I am so excited to bring you the show, to bring you these topics. This is our first episode, and so that's really exciting. And wouldn't you know it, first episode, and I have a head cold, and so you might hear my voice go in and out. I might get a little bit squeaky because why not have a head cold when you're starting a show? That sounds fun. So we're going to roll with it. And I'm so excited about this episode today. A little bit about how it's going to go. First of all, I'm going to have a guest today. Her name is Ann Moore, and we're going to talk about heart-centered kink. A little bit more about Ann and introducing her in a little bit here. But in our first section today, I'm really going to talk about, who am I? Like, who am I? Why should you tune into my show? And what is this show going to be about? What can you expect from these topics, from the show? What are we even going to talk about here? What does courageously expanding in love even mean? And so that's what we're going to talk about here in our first segment. And then we're going to bring in Ann and talk about heart-centered kink. And I just am bursting with excitement to bring her to you and to have just a juicy conversation. So to start off with, who am I? Who is Elizabeth Ann Cunningham? And what the heck is a love coach? What does that even mean? Like, people just make up their own job descriptions now. Like, what are we even doing here? So I'm a certified life coach, and I specialize in coaching people specifically in polyamorous and non-monogamous relationships. And I also specialize in coaching people. I'm an erotic blueprint coach, certified erotic blueprint coach. So I also specialize in coaching people inside of sex and eroticism as well. So I get that like, excuse me, again, little head cold. All right. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have this show is to really talk about topics in expanding love. And this is something that I've been doing for a very long time now. I've been working and studying inside of the field of sexuality and gender and relationships for 14 years. I have 2 degrees from the University of Kansas. And after I graduated, I actually worked with a domestic violence center for a while, and I gave talks and lectures around the community at the center, even at the University of Kansas, about what is domestic violence, what are unhealthy relationships, what can we do to prevent ourselves from getting into these types of relationships, or if you've been in those relationships, how do you get yourself out? And what I really realized was that, what we speak into the world and the words that we create expand what's possible. And I wanted to, as much as, talking about, getting out of abusive relationships is very needed, very helpful, and my former colleagues are doing amazing work. I wanted to start having conversations and really expanding into the world what's possible, what's actually out there, what is this whole world of love, sex, and relationships? It seems so conceptual and vast. And how can we bring more of that to the forefront? Because I really do believe what you speak about expands into the world. And so I wanted to really work my former colleagues out of a job so that people really already know how to explore their own sexuality, how to create relationships that are going to empower them, going to have everyone be fulfilled and happy. So, for the past 7 years, I've been working inside of the field of transformational life coaching. And that really is, in a nutshell, having people be empowered to take action in their life. And the past 6 of those 7 years, I have been really expanding and coaching people inside of relationships, and specifically polyamorous relationships. And for those of you, we're not going to talk about polyamory. Maybe we'll talk about polyamory today. I don't know. We're going to find out with Ann in our heart-centered kink. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about polyamory. Again, so excited. Okay. So polyamory, poly means many, amory means love. And so polyamory just means many loves. And so one of the things that I do is I help people create relationships that might have more than 2 people in them. And inside of that, what comes is this beautiful cascade of learning new communication skills, learning about your own sexuality, learning about other sexuality, navigating through things like jealousy, heartbreak, upset, all of those things. But I don't want to make it into, like a daytime drama. I actually want to have people express these relationships in a way that's healthy and fulfilling for everyone. So that brings me to why this show? Why this show? So, have you ever seen the documentary Happy? There's a documentary and it's just called Happy. And it is a study around the world, around the globe, of what makes people happy. What is the one thing that makes people happiest? And they studied people from literally around the globe, all walks of life. They had someone who was living in a tent in India. They had someone who was a stockbroker in France. They had people from Louisiana who were just hanging out in the bayou in Louisiana. They had literally people from all walks of life, all different classes, races, ages, different sexualities, different abilities, literally all walks of life. And the number one thing that they found that made people happiest was connected, fulfilling, and supportive relationships. That was the number one thing, no matter who you were, that if you had connected, fulfilling, and supportive relationships, that you ultimately were a pretty happy person. And it's this documentary, and alongside of the work that I do, that I really truly believe that if we are focusing on the love that we're sharing between others, the love that we have for ourselves, and our ability to connect with others, and our ability to cross the barriers when we aren't able to connect with others, is ultimately going to lead to the happiness of people, the happiness of you, the happiness of me, and the happiness of people in general. And so that, coupled along with, I just love talking about sex and sexuality. And there is so much shame and embarrassment and misinformation about sex and sexuality. And that part is so huge when we're talking about relationships, especially intimate relationships. And so you can't talk about, how to connect with others and have beautiful, intimate relationships without addressing this huge elephant in the room, which is sex and sexuality. And oftentimes we either don't address this huge elephant in the room, we pretend it's not there, or we make the elephant wrong. We're like, the elephant is gross. The elephant is shameful. The elephant shouldn't be here in the first place. And it ultimately tears and wears down at our own experience of ourselves and our ability to connect intimately with others, which I believe is what we ultimately want. And so this show is to talk about that elephant, to talk about sex and sexuality and what we're wanting to talk about. Some of us just sit in the room and we're like, but can we please talk about the elephant? I really want to talk about the elephant. The elephant is so good and happy, and there's something there for me. And so that is what we're here to do. And so starting with our conversation today with Anne, Anne Moore is, and I'm personally so excited to introduce Anne in the second part of our second section of our show today, because truly Anne is someone who I've actually had the privilege of being mentored by in getting my certification as an erotic blueprint coach. And that is just one thing that Anne does in this world in talking about, excuse me. All right. I'm going to have to take a pause when talking about Anne. Okay, beautiful. Yes, I have personally had the privilege of working with Anne, as she is one of the master trainers for the erotic blueprint coach certification that I did. And so I have seen her work up close and personal, which has just been one of the highlights of my past year in being certified as an erotic blueprint coach. But Anne is really your go-to sexpert and relationship guide, and she helps couples and singles to create hot, satisfying sex and playful, pleasure-based, loving connection for a lifetime. She supports high-achieving humans in getting out of their heads and into their bodies for the kind of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and playful, mind-melting erotic adventures they've always dreamt about. She's an advanced erotic blueprints trainer, a conscious kink coach, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today, a somatic sexologist, polyam coach, and certified sexological body worker with over 30 years experience in mindful sexuality, intentional relationship design, embodiment, shibari erotic bondage, conscious movement, embodiment shamanism, and energetic expansion. Whew, she's amazing. She's coached and guided hundreds of couples in self-discovery, deeper communication, and erotic education and spiritual evolution. And I am so honored and privileged that she said yes to being on my first episode. What a treat. What a treat that this amazing human is going to be on my first episode. So I cannot wait to bring her on for you. That's what we're going to do in the second section of our show here. And we're going to talk about heart-centered kink with Anne Moore. So stick around and we will be right back. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love. And as I said on the last segment, we now have Anne Moore joining us. Anne Moore, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to have you on my show.
I'm really honored and delighted. I love seeing you shine. I love this show and what you're putting together.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been such a delight to work with you and now to have a chance to talk with you on the show. So let's do it.
I know. I'm so excited. All right. Well, we'll do all the chit chat later, but yeah, I would love to just hop right in. And my first question for you is, what is heart-centered kink? What is that?
Great question. So, in the kink world, there has been a term that's been coming along, sort of, that it's been conscious kink. And the idea there is that it's bringing mindfulness into kinkiness. And a lot of it is weaving in some tantric practices and breath work, but it's about making kink really transformational and expansive. And I love that. But what I find when I'm working with my people is there's still something missing. They want a deeper level. They really want to feel like when they are showing themselves at their kinkiest, the places where they feel like they might be unlovable or they still might have some shame, or that when they can be met with total acceptance and love, that is like some of the deepest healing there is out there. And
Mm.
so I'm shifting to using the term heart-centered kink, because what I find is even people who come to me who've been in the kink world for a while, um, they may still be doing it with some shame overlaid. Even
Mm.
though they're in it and they're playing with it, they still haven't quite gotten to and actually, this is how I like to be loved. Let me tell you
Mm.
about that. So that's heart-centered kink. It's saying, actually, all of this, any way we play together, if we can agree, if we're respectful of each other, if we're really showing up in all our vulnerability, that's love. And it creates the kind of connected, fulfilling, supportive relationships you were describing that makes people super happy.
That's beautiful. I love all of that. So, for those of you, because we're more familiar with the world of kink, but I think that a lot of people listening may not be, and it might be kind of weird to have this like, what do you like? Heart, okay, you want to connect in love while you're getting tied up? Like, how does that work? Like, so
Yes.
can you explain a little bit more about like what is kink and how do you have connection when you're being tied up?
Right. Yes. Beautiful. So it's one of the biggest myths about kink is that it's about violence, or it's
Mm.
about exploitation, or it's about acting really mean to each other.
Mm.
And often people think that it's about BDSM, so that it has to be about like whips and chains and really extreme things. And kink actually is anything that feels naughty and fun and mischievous that you agree to do together. A kink scene
Mm.
can be tying your lover up or being tied up, but can also be wanting to be a really pretty unicorn and be praised and petted for being sparkly. Like, it can be, there's a huge range of the ways that you can play in kink. And maybe you have shame about that. Maybe you've never told anybody that you wanted to
Mm.
be a pretty unicorn and be petted. And finally you dared to like tell your husband maybe, or your lover. Um, and they said, oh my God, I'd love to do that with you. That place right there, that's the beginning of heart-centered kink, of someone saying, oh, you want this? Let me give it to you. I can see how much you want it. I can see that it lights you up. Yeah, I'm a yes. That place right there. Um,
Mm.
and so you're saying, like, how can you be connected when you're tying each other up? Well, first of all, it is very bonding to do that.
But I'm
Yeah, but really the bonding begins with the conversation of saying, I've got something that I want to ask you. Will you do it with me? That consent piece. That already is super bonding, because it's saying, I want to show you who I am, and I will you accept me in this place? And not just accept me, but will you meet me there? Are you excited about doing that with me? Are you willing to really go there with me? It can be really frustrating for people to have a partner who just goes through the motions. And they're like, oh, you want that? I guess. Okay. That doesn't come to, it's not an acceptance place, and it's not play then, really. It's sort of forced. It's like awkward. And so applying that thing, that the rule that we've learned in the erotic blueprint coaching really applies in kink, which is, unless it's a super hell yes, it's a no. So it's the consent conversation of like, would you like to tie me up and spank me? And the other person could say, I'm a no to tying you up, but I really do want to spank you. Let's do that. Or vice versa. I would love to like spank you, but I don't want to tie you up. Like any combination. And the really big piece is, I just had a couple where we were talking about this, because he is really submissive and wants to receive intense sensation. To him, his body loves that. He loves to it helps him feel his body, to be touched in a way that might seem really intense to someone else. So spanking, caning, something like that. She's afraid of being violent. She's afraid of being a person who could leave marks on another person's body, even though that's what he most wants. And so the work there, the heart-centered piece, is for us to realize we have all of these multitudes in us, and that and in the moment she's fine with it. It's after the fact that she comes out and she goes, whoa, what did I just do? So it's really about slowing down, like going in baby steps, and not necessarily jumping into something that I would call pretty varsity level before you've like done the training wheels. So doing really small steps. A lot of people, the biggest mistake they make when they come in is they are all or nothing. They're like, wow, I'm kinky. I finally found somebody who wants to be kinky with me. Will you be my dom? Like, that's the question. And the other person's like, I don't know. Because the question there, in saying it that way, it's basically, they could mean, I want you to dominate me 24/7 for the rest of my life. Or it could be, I want you to tie me up and spank me for half an hour. So it's about getting really precise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge spectrum. Yes, that answered my question. I mean, that was beautiful. That was an amazing answer to my question. Yeah. And like one of the things that oh my gosh, so much gold in what you just said. And I think one of the things that I notice with the people that I talk to as well is that idea of meeting people where you're at and knowing where you're at first, right? Because then you can actually like start to have a place to go off of, and really asking those like deeper questions. So what is something in heart-centered kink, like what do you see people may run into first? Like, you know, when people first come to you, what's something that you really notice that people are dealing with?
Yeah. So I had a couple come for an immersion, for example. They're a married couple. They love each other like crazy. They have young kids. They're great parents. And they wanted to play in a kinky way together, but one of them was afraid. She was afraid, mostly because she'd been in a relationship before where there had been some like edgy play, but they never talked about it. It just happened. There was no consent. It went farther than she wanted. And she ended up feeling really, really not great about it. Like really, like it crossed her edges, and there was a lot to unpack. And it was something where this person was cheating on her. And so she was associating all of that with really not great relationship, like not security. So we took lots of extra time to make sure she felt really safe. But the biggest question that I asked is, so you want to play together? How do you want to feel when it's happening? How do you want to feel afterward? It doesn't actually matter what you do together. We can figure that out in a little bit, but how do you want to feel? How do you want to make each other feel? Let's go there first. And then we'll look at, do we want to use ropes? Do we want to use Velcro handcuffs? Do we want to use nothing at all and just words to
Mm.
create that feeling?
I think that's so beautiful. Thank you for kind of spelling that out because that really does paint a whole picture of really kink is this whole world and there's so much to do and explore and play in. Like I love that you keep bringing this, play
Yeah.
into it, right? And that, what there really is to do and really think about like you said, I don't think that people think about that is how do you want to feel? What an amazing question.
Yeah.
How do you want to feel? How do you want this? And then we'll work out the play stuff later, but really having that starting point, that anchor point of how do you want to feel?
Right.
Wow.
Like, do you want to feel like it's your first time, maybe? And so you want to feel really safe, but like there's a little bit of edge. Or do you want to feel like kind of terrified, but there's words where you can check in and make sure you're okay? Or do you want to feel like super rebellious and bratty and like, screw you, and just like completely wrestling and fighting, but you make sure that they're going to still hold you? Like, how do you want to feel? What's fun for you? And what feels, juicy, but also what brings out those shadow parts that you're, afraid are unlovable, where you can like play with
Mm,
them together. Yeah. I think it's
mm.
Dan Savage who calls it that role play and kink play. It's like cops and robbers for grown-ups with your pants off and adult sexual privilege. You're playing. You're
You're playing.
yeah.
I love that. I love that. All right. Well, we're going to take a break. And on the next part, I'd love to explore a little bit more like what is this shadow side that people deal with?
Mhm.
Because people really do have, shadows and things that come up for them inside of this world. And so after our break, we're going to share about that a little bit more. All right, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show. And I am here with Ann Moore. On our last segment, we talked about, what is heart-centered kink? How can people be heart-centered and really play with one another? And that's really what we got out of the last section is that you can play, you can meet each other where you're at, and you can really start to have these deep consent conversations that build trust and again that heart-centeredness that you can have in kink. Now that we're back, we're going to talk about what are the shadow sides to kink. That was something that you mentioned right before break, and I'm curious, what are the shadow sides to kink? What do people deal with?
Thanks. Great question. So the shadow sides in kink are actually just the shadow sides in all of sexuality. It's the place where we come up against our desires and saying them out loud, actually owning them first, going, wow, I really do want that. My body really does like this. I'm going to ask somebody out. I'm going to value it. I'm not going to go like, oh, that's too weird. That's too yucky. I'm ashamed of that. I'm going to ask out loud for that. And then I'm going to receive it fully if someone's a yes. Like that's the whole arc. And the
Mm,
place where we get stuck is that second part. Sometimes it's the first part of like, I don't even know what I want. Usually when people say they don't know what they want, they do. They're just ashamed of it.
mm,
They've buried it, they've hidden it away. I was like this for many years where I had all these kinky fantasies of like being spanked and tied up, and I just thought that that was like wrong and dirty. And I also was convinced that that couldn't happen in a loving relationship. I thought that
mm,
could only happen with like messed up kind of dysfunctional relationships where it wasn't actually about building intimacy together, like maybe anonymous or just with someone who was like not available. That was
mm.
my idea. And part of that, I think, came from when I was a young teen. I remember borrowing. My mom had, she loved romance novels and she had all these like bodice ripper romance novels around. And yeah, there was romance, but every one of them had like hot sex scenes, or
Right.
at least hot, like super teasing, like power things where he's like storming away or she's like being bratty, or and they were super cisgender and they were super, monogamously centered, but they were really hot. And
Mhm.
and all of that tension, all of that excitement went away as soon as they figured out they were in love. Then it was like, everything's cool and calm. And there's
Mm.
like all of that sort of joyous, like, tension went away. And so I had that idea of like, well, if you're really in love, then all of this kind of, edgy stuff, you can't bring that in, because
Mm.
I guess I thought it was destabilizing. And
Mm.
especially as a mom, I thought it wasn't okay to even, acknowledge these desires in myself. Um, so that's the place where a lot of people get stuck. And I have to say, that's true of any of the areas of eroticism and sexuality. So you and I both work with the erotic blueprints.
Right.
So there's 5 erotic blueprint types, and kinky is one of them. And there's
Right.
also energetic, which is like empath, sensitive, super sacred sexuality. There's sensual, which is about delighting, igniting all of the senses. So romance and beauty and sunsets and fine dining and extravagance and luxury. And then there's also shapeshifter, which is like everything. So I've also seen people have shame about, for instance, being super sensitive, especially if they've been raised to be masculine.
Mm.
They think they're supposed to be like super bold and direct. When I forgot sexual, sexual is like the super direct. Let's just do it. We could just get naked and do it. That would be so great. Let's do that. We have body parts that fit together. Who wouldn't want to like rub them together? And a lot of people who are raised to be men think that's what they have to do. They have to like get laid. They have to like, just have conquests. And if they are sensitive, that may not be their MO at all. And they might never have been able to acknowledge that. They might be have a mask on around that. So really similar in kink. And especially because in our culture, we're pretty, as a mainstream, we've gotten more kink positive, but it's been pretty shut down and shame for a long time. It was in the was it the DSM, like it was considered like psychologically a problem to be kinky for
Oh,
a really long time. It's fairly recent that that has changed, partly
got
because
it.
they've done all these studies that if you actually say what you want out loud and someone else agrees to do it and it's consensual, that actually those are the most well-adjusted people, are the ones who've come out of the closet and said, hey, I want this. Yeah. So the shadows are just any of the places where there's something that we truly want and love, but we decide it's not good enough, it's not okay, it's dirty and wrong, and we shut it away, or we numb it out, we disown it, we don't say it out loud. And what happens then is if you're in relationship, but there's some part that you're hiding away, it
Mm.
means that other person can't possibly see you. And it means you never feel really loved for who you are. And there's resentment that builds up. There's fear, there's boredom because you're not actually doing the thing that really lights you up, turns your engines on.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by shadow. It's the unconscious. It's the things that we've buried. Or maybe we think about them like we have private fantasies, but we're like, oh, I could never tell anybody that I actually want to like smash pies in people's faces. And that's a turn on for me. Or I want to like do play.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what was the second question? You were saying, what's the shadow side?
I said,
Oh,
what's the shadow side and what are people dealing with? And
yeah.
you did absolutely answer that question. Was there something else that you wanted to say?
No, that was it. Just and it leads into like, so what? Why is it important to talk about it? What is that? Does that help? What does that mean? Um,
Yeah.
so shame, Brene Brown talks about this a lot, that shame lives in silence and shadows. There's a lot of different
Mm.
people who explore this, but she's done so much research around this.
Yeah.
And saying sharing shame out loud, shining the light on it is the thing that allows it to be released. And that is the beauty of kink, is often in this blueprint, we've got really deep shame about like, oh man, I just, I actually really love to be tied up and feel helpless, or to struggle against the ropes, or, and to be able to say it out loud and then be met with acceptance, but then actually be able to do it with your body in the moment. That's for me, that was the most transformational experience I ever had.
Yeah.
Where I was like, wow, I've had this fantasy for years. I don't even know if I'm going to like it, but I'm going to try it. I'm so curious. I'm going to be willing to try it. And when I tried it, I was like, yep, I love this. Yes, I do. Amazing. My body just like, woo, it was just, I felt magic. I felt magical. I felt alive. I felt seen. I felt just total joy. And have been playing in that ever since, and have discovered that I also love to give someone else that experience. So why is it important to talk about? Because it's a spiritual path. It's the same spiritual path that says any part of me that I don't accept, maybe I'll try to share that and love it and get help from you to love it, so that I can really come into unconditional love by me, for me. And therefore for you.
Yeah, beautiful. And yeah, exactly, like one of my, when people are like, what's one of like the most beautiful moments you've had in your life? One of them is my first kink scene ever. It was one of the most beautiful, like transformational moments of my life, because you absolutely feel seen and heard, and like a part of your spirit can now be alive, like fully alive, and recognized by another person. It's beautiful. And which my next question is, what's possible? Like, we're like, okay, we know what heart-centered kink is. We know what some of the shadows are, but now it's like, what's possible now? What is possible?
Yes. So that's the next level. It's the transformational piece, where there's the deeply supportive relationship, the communication is there, the consent, and that means you can move into things like playing with archetypes, playing with generational patterns and shifting them in a single scene, because you're willing to bring all of that energy into the space. I have had the experience so I am also identify as poly, and ethically non-monogamous. And my partner and I had an experience where I was essentially channeling all the rage of all women in the scene, and he was there to just hold the container and support it and receive it and let it like run through him with his body as a conduit. It was extraordinary. I still get chills.
I was like, I was gonna say, that gave me chills. I just got chills like all the way from my feet all the way up my spine when you shared that.
It was amazing. And so yes, we were playing one-on-one in that case, but it also felt like definitely in the collective, in all of these different realms, that's what's possible. And it doesn't matter what equipment is there or what the particular scene is. It's like, let's bring all of us, which really includes all of everything. Like, let's do that. It means you can access altered states. You can access trance states where you can then have downloads of insight. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about any of our viewers out there, but who knew, talking about heart-centered kink, we were going to get all the way to transformation and like healing generational trauma. Right. And here we are. That's beautiful. That's incredible. Okay.
And it is one of the most deeply connective ways of engaging you could possibly imagine. Yeah.
And I think it does also go to that creating that consent container, and that, that everything is out on the table. Everything is talked about. You can bring your full self, because regardless of what you're doing, kink or something else, but if you're bringing your full self, something transformational is going to happen. And so,
Oh, yeah.
and so this is just a beautiful container to
Yeah.
explore that. That's amazing. All right, we're going to go on another short break. And after the break, we're going to talk about, okay, we have all of these possibilities. So what now? Like, that's what we're going to talk about after the break. What now? Oh my gosh, so excited. All right, stick around. We'll see you in a second. Hi, welcome back to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, and I'm here with Ann Moore, and we are talking about heart-centered kink, and this has been a profound conversation. We have gone from what is heart-centered kink even, and what are some of the things that people deal with inside of kink, what is even kink, all the way to transformational experiences in heart-centered kink. This has been a beautiful conversation. And the question that I have for you is, if there is one thing, I know there's so much and you have so much knowledge, and this conversation has been so beautiful, but if there's one thing that you want the viewers to get from this show, what is that? From the show with you, what is that?
Yeah, thank you. The one thing would be, you can eroticize anything, bring all of yourself with consent. You can eroticize anything. So that scene that we were talking about earlier, that was a consent piece where I said, is it okay for me to bring my anger? Is it okay for me to actually be seen in all of my power? Are you willing to go there with me? And such a yes. And in fact, in the middle of the scene, he was like, is that all you've got? And I was like, wait a minute.
Oh, that's so fun.
So wonderful. But it showed me he was like completely down there giving permission. But like, you can have a kink scene, you can have a love scene, you can have an erotic exchange that's about grief. You can bring in insecurity, you can bring in any part of yourself. Those are those shadow pieces. Bring in all of you and say, hey, how can we play with our bodies with this? And move it through, and then can shift its alchemy into joy, pleasure, delight, laughter. And then you can shift right back into grief. It can all be there. You don't have to be in a good mood to do it.
There's not a way. There's not a way that you need to be.
There's no particular way you need to be. Be the way you are.
Yeah. Wow. What amazing permission.
Yeah.
I really do. I really think that so many of us think that there's a way that we need to be. I mean, in general, like in life, but like definitely in sex. Oh yeah, like there's a way that you need to be. You know, if I'm gonna do kink, like there's a way that I need to be about it. You know, there's things I need to figure out here. And yeah, to just be like, no, you can actually just fully be you.
Right. It's that shift from I'm not in the mood to here's the mood I'm in. What do you want to do with this?
Oh, I love that so much. I can just like imagine my play partner watching this video being like, he's writing stuff down right now. I know it. All right. If there's one action that someone could take out of watching this show today, what would that be?
That would be going back to the how do you want to feel? And I would say apply that to any time you're with another human and you want to engage and play intimately together. How do you want to feel during, before, after? And then what would make that, what would create that? And also to get super clear about clear container, clear roles. How long are you going to do it? Who's going to do what to whom? How long is it going to happen? What do you need afterward to like unpack it? How do you set up the room? Like take time to prepare before you go into it. And actually, I guess that's this, there's two pieces. There's you can be anyway, but there's also, doesn't have to be spontaneous. Planning is awesome because then you have everything you want and need right there. And it's exactly the setting you want. Plan it ahead of time. Make sure you've got time, set it up. Yeah.
I love that. And I think, and that's such a key point to make as well. There we go. Is that, yeah, it can still be fun if it's planned.
Oh,
I think,
yes.
yeah.
In fact, it's more fun if it's fun.
I agree.
Right. Because then you've actually consented. You've actually consented to when, you've said when it's going to end, you know, it's not endless, all of that. Yeah. Right. And
Yeah.
then, of course, if you feel like you've planned it ahead of time and you show up and you're not in the mood, you can say, and here's the mood that I'm in. What do you want to do with that? Yeah.
Yeah. How are we going to play? I mean, I think that that's like one of my biggest takeaways from talking to you today, Anne, has been really the permission to play. Like with whatever shows up. This is the mood that I'm in. This is how I'm feeling right now. This is what I've been thinking about. This is what I want. And instead of approaching it like, oh no, like, what are we going to do about that? It's like, oh, what are we going to do about that? Right.
Right.
And so it really is that like spin on like the play of it and the exploration of it and the talking, just saying, just allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to just say it.
Right.
And to be received.
Yeah. And play to me means you can't get it wrong. Like kids in a sandbox, there's no wrong way to do it. So, you know, in sex, there's no wrong way to do it. Like it's permission to be awkward and clumsy and laugh and fart and just like be human, you know, and just like bring all of that and the joy of like, oh my God, we're just like these human animals in these bodies and yay. Yep.
Oh my gosh, I just love that so much. It's so true though. It's so true. Oh my gosh. All right, and oh my gosh, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you for being on the show with me today. I'm almost disappointed that this conversation is now like coming to a conclusion. But what would you like to promote? What are you up to in the world?
Thank you. So I want to offer for anyone who emails me, I've got a little guide, a guide to heart-centered kink, getting started. It's called How to Play in Kinky Ways with Nice People Like You. It's a little PDF. So my email is yes.annnemore@gmail.com. It's just 1 O. So it's like, oh, you know, you want more. So yes.annmore@gmail.com. And then you can also, if you already are like, oh my God, I really want to work with her, you can go to my website and apply to work with me in my private practice. And I do both remote coaching. I also do hands-on work as a sexological body worker and as a kink practitioner. So my website is yesandmore.com. And there's an apply now button, so you can apply there. And you can also find me on Facebook, Ann Moore, ANNEMORE. I post a lot there and on Instagram. On Instagram, it's Yes Ann Moore. And there's just a lot of content there. And I have some blog posts on my website as well about kink and other things. And I'm a shapeshifter in the erotic blueprints, which means I do all the things. I talk about all the different areas. So yeah, come find me. Come play with me.
Come play. Go play with Anne. Go play with Anne. Get your kink on. Get your all the things on. Oh, I love that with nice people like me.
Right. Because that's the other thing we talked earlier about. Why is it important to talk about kink and who we are and what we want? It's because there are so many more kinky people in your life than you think, because they all look like me and you. Right? Totally. We pay taxes, we walk our dogs, we have kids, and we love to be tied up or, whatever it is that we're into. Yeah.
It is absolutely true. Us kinksters, we're everywhere.
We are. And the more we talk about it and show up and step out of the closet, the more we can find each other and the more we can support each other. And the more we can support the people who are still stuck in the closet and the shadows and the shame.
So important. So absolutely important. And thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to have you on my show today. Thank you being my first guest.
It was so fun. What an honor.
How cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad my Wi-Fi came back on so I could do it. Yay.
Oh my gosh, I was scared. I saw that message. I was like, no.
It all worked.
But it did. It all worked. It's all working out. But yes, thank you so much. Yes, if you want to work with Ann, please go to her website, yesandmore.com, or email her yes.andmore@gmail. Yes.
Yep, that's it. Yes. And are there
Perfect.
show notes? Will they be in the show notes as well? So
There will be show notes. Absolutely. There will be links and places to find Ann. So
perfect.
Please reach out to her and get your questions answered. Have a bunch of fun playing with kink with other nice people like you.
Yes, and I just want to honor you again for this show that you've put together and this forum and this conversation. I love this moving from relationships that aren't working, that are dysfunctional, into like, oh my God, what if we just build the great thing together and the possibilities? So I love that you're standing for possibility and big love.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And that's a beautiful place to end. Thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for those of you who are watching live. Thank you for those of you who are watching in the future people. Appreciate you, and we will talk soon, meaning every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific. Come check out the Elizabeth Cunningham Show with me and my wonderful guest in Courageously Expanding Love. You have been listening to the Elizabeth Cunningham Show, Courageously Expanding Love with me, Elizabeth Cunningham. Tune in live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on transformationtalkradio.com, where we shed light on relationships, sex, love, and the ways we wish we could be, but never thought were possible. Learn to love yourself and create the relationships you want. Connect with me at ElizabethAnnCunningham.com. That's ElizabethAnnCunningham.com.